Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share a quick comparison of the Sigma FPL and the Sony FX3. Now, the FPL retails for $2,500 US, and the FX3 comes in at $3,900 US, a little under that. And these are two very similar yet incredibly different cameras. And I say that because, of course, the FPL is the smallest full-frame camera on Earth, really tiny, and 61 megapixels on the sensor, a huge bump up from the previous generation. We also now have a hybrid autofocus system that we did not have on Gen 1. Of course, this is L-mount based. It is a cinema camera, no question about it. We have active cooling, just like we have on the more expensive FX3, but this is more of a hybrid and at the same time has features that the FX3 doesn't, and that's why I'm doing this really quick, rough comparison. Now, obviously, if you already own L-mount glass, well, it's a no-brainer. If you already own E-mount glass, same thing applies. What you need to bear in mind is that this camera, with its fixed display, which is arguably, I think, one of the biggest issues you could have with it. Granted, it does have mounting points, so you will likely want to use a cage because there aren't that many, but that does rectify the issue with this being a fixed display. It has some touchscreen capability. It is a big improvement from the previous generation, and I give Sigma a tremendous amount of credit for not only making the first gen, but coming through on the second gen and making it affordable. Because at $2,500, it is affordable. This is the only camera of its kind because you can shoot true 4K, DCI Cinema 4K, 24p. With this camera, you can hook it up to solid-state drives, externally record that way, something the FX3 cannot do. I'm not sure why Sony didn't make that a possibility, although I could speculate. And it does it all in this incredibly compact form factor. Now, it doesn't have an EVF, but there is an optional one. If you want it, you can get it, and that is good to have. Options are always good to have. The layout, I think, in terms of the power button, the cinema still switch, the record button, all well thought out. I think the I/O is also well thought out, and the build quality is outstanding. It is made in Japan, and again, at its price point, this is the only camera that can call itself a cinema camera, and it is, all while still being able to shoot, 61 megapixel landscape style photography, something you just will not find from any other camera on the market. But battery life is about half of what the FX3 is capable of, and when it comes to overall autofocus, it's a world apart from the FX3, and that's really the main difference besides the manufacturer and the mount. So if you're wondering, well, then why would you entertain the FX3? Well, if you don't care about the hybrid capability that the FPL delivers, then the FX3 should be on your radar. And that's because even though it's significantly larger, it does, and I do believe that the FPL inspired Sony. There's no question about it. I mean, this was the original FP came out and Sony was sitting there saying, why do they have the smallest full-frame cinema camera on Earth? And I think Sony said, well, we won't make it the smallest, but we'll make it one that will satisfy E-mount users. And that's a pretty big party. And also, remember, Sigma is known for their lenses. They have made cameras in the past, but Sony is a much bigger outfit and obviously broader audience. Sigma really more so known for their lenses, and camera bodies have kind of, I don't want to say faded away, but this is not their bread and butter. But what Sigma's done here is amazing. Now with Sony, you are getting that fully articulating display that Sigma is not giving you out of the box. You're getting quarter-20 mounts everywhere, so this is literally a cage-free camera if you choose. Battery life is significantly better, although I could nitpick and say the FX3 could be even better, but when it compares to the FPL, it is significantly better. But the area that the FX3 smokes the FPL is autofocus. But remember, you're working with a 12 megapixel sensor, and this is literally a video-only show. So the irony of that is that when it comes to it being a cinema camera, the FX3 doesn't perform, outside of autofocus, to many of the specifications that people will expect from a cinema camera, and that's why I mentioned DCI 4K. It lives here, it doesn't live here. And that's significant because a lot of people will take issue with the fact that Sony's even calling the FX3 a cinema camera. There's no true 24p. You have true 24p with the FPL. But in the same vein, you will not record 10-bit internally here. You can with the FX3. And the FX3, even though it doesn't support SSDs, which I wish Sony would somehow deliver that in a firmware update, you do have compact flash express type A card compatibility. These are incredibly expensive. This is a 160 gig card and it is $400, but it does give you basically NVMe type performance, as you can see right there, rated 800 and 700 on the read write. So basically a tiny SSD inside the camera, and that's not necessary, by the way, to record 10-bit. You can use a standard UHS 2 card. No, I shouldn't say standard, but a UHS 2 card will pull it off. So why would you buy the FX3 over the FPL? Well, I've already stated why. If you are an E-mount user and you have a lineup of glass and you really care about autofocus and you only plan on shooting video, even though this doesn't have the wide breadth of cinema capability that the tiny FPL has, it does have autofocus that it just cannot, as I stated before, the FPL cannot touch. And if that plus the E-mount glass plus the overall build quality and ergonomics suit your needs, there's really nothing to think about. On the flip side, if you are a hybrid shooter and you're going to, be okay with the ergonomics of this camera, which you will want to get Sigma's little grip for it because the ergonomics are not fantastic without it. It is just a square. Then you won't find anything like this on the market except for Sony's A1, and even that camera still will not have the literal cinema features of the FPL. So if you have L-mount glass and you like to shoot manual, then this is a no-brainer, in my opinion. The active cooling, the cinema capability that this tiny giant is capable of is really unrivaled. There is nothing else like it. And so while a lot of people may think that these are competing cameras, I don't see them as such. And that's why I called this a quick comparison, because they are not apples to apples. Even though they're both aimed at cinema users, they are going to tear cinema users apart, respectively, in different directions. So this is really the hybrid, but has the cinema features that are omitted from the FX3. So food for thought. Both are, I think, great cameras. They're for very different users, even though a lot of people might think they're for overlapping audiences. So it's just something you have to be aware of. Again, the FPL, far less expensive than the FX3, but you are giving up and gaining things at the same time. Giving up autofocus, but gaining resolution that the FX3 doesn't even want to touch. I mean, 12 megapixels versus 61. This is a camera that you could go out and shoot landscape stills with, and 4K DCI. You can't make that happen with the FX3. In fact, you can't make that happen with any camera other than the FPL. But if that's not what you're looking to achieve, and bear in mind, as I stated earlier, you'll be doing that in manual mode, because even though we now have a hybrid autofocus system here, it's nothing compared to what you would still expect out of a modern autofocus system on any full-frame camera on the market. So then you look over here and you have over 700 points of phase detection and eye autofocus, which they also have eye autofocus on the FPL, but it is not comparable. None of the autofocus capability is comparable to the FX3. So again, if you're looking to shoot in auto, if you're looking to record 10-bit video on, or rather in camera, the FX3 will deliver. Articulating display, it'll deliver. But they being Sony, have omitted some key cinema features that will, I think, have people straying away from the FX3, maybe to the A7S III, save some money there, or biting the bullet on the FX6. And obviously understanding that this doesn't have an ND filter, no waveform, many things that you might expect standard from a cinema camera. Whereas, of course, Sigma's making it very clear with the FPL that this is a hybrid, even though it is a cinema camera in the tiniest form on Earth. So really like both of these. They are definitely conversation pieces. I'm curious which all of you out there, are more interested in. The FPL, I think, is a bargain, but certainly not a one-size-fits-all. This is for a very specific user that knows exactly what they want and knows there's nothing else like it, whereas the FX3 is the best video camera Sony has ever stuffed into an A-mount form factor, not A-mount, excuse me, E-mount form factor. Alpha body is what I meant, style, and it really is best in class when it comes to that, and who knows what the firmware path will be for this camera as time goes on. But both are really intriguing. Do love the ability to record to SSDs like a cinema camera should be able to, something that is missing from the FX3 that hopefully Sony can address, but it may be a hardware limitation. That rounds things out. Any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. Hit that like button, and as usual, please feel free to subscribe, and please stay safe. Later.